This is the Knowledge Graph Insights podcast, episode number 34. When you think about architecting knowledge systems for a giant business like a global airline, you might picture huge databases and complex spaghetti diagrams of enterprise architectures. These do, in fact, exist, but the thing that actually makes these systems work is an understanding of the needs of the people who use, manage, and finance them. That's the important human-focused work that Mara Inglezakis Owens does as an enterprise architect for a major U.S. airline.
Welcome to the Knowledge Graph Insights podcast, where experts on knowledge graphs and the semantic web share their wisdom with the digital and business communities. Our mission is to demystify and democratize knowledge graph technology and practices to make the benefits of knowledge graphs and semantic technology accessible to all. And now, here's your host, Larry Swanson.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode number 34 of the Knowledge Graph Insights podcast. I am really delighted today to welcome to the show Mara, I'm going to get this right, Inglezakis Owens. She's an enterprise architect at a big airline. So welcome, Mara. Tell the folks a little bit more about what you're up to these days.
Hi, everybody. My name's Mara, and these days I am achieving my childhood dream of working in aviation, not as a pilot, but that'll happen. But as an enterprise architect, I've been doing EA, also data and information architecture across the whole scope of supply chain for about 10 years, everything from commodity sourcing to SaaS, software as a service, to now logistics. And a lot of my days I spend interviewing subject matter experts, convincing business leaders they should do stuff. And on my best days, I get to crawl around my hands and knees in an airplane hangar.
Oh, fun. That is, that I didn't know. I knew that there's that great picture of you sitting in the jet engine,
Yeah.
but I didn't realize this is the fulfillment of a childhood dream. That's awesome. But everything you just said ties in so well to the tagline on your LinkedIn profile. You're like, I'm a people-loving architect and data leader. And one of the things I love about that, we talked a fair amount at the Knowledge Graph conference about your background in the humanities
We
and
did.
your transition into your current role. I would love to hear, and what you just said, like the end of what you were just saying about so much of your job is about interacting with people and convincing, business leaders to fund you and stuff. Can you talk a little bit about that? Like what drew you into the humanities in the first place? You transition out of it, and here we are today.
100%. Before I talk about me and the humanities, I love to read. I was an epistemologist and a 19th century scholar. But before that, when I was a little girl, I was writing my own websites in HTML, XML, and some of the technologies that eventually got to be used in the semantic web, which is how I entered the knowledge graph space way later as an adult. So that got put on hold. I love to read, so I became a humanities scholar. And I was for about 5 years the lowest of the low adjuncts at an R1. Um, this my teaching experience, not my scholarship, although I did a lot of thinking about how people interact with written media and how they enter internal argumentation with those media and come to know the world differently. That's what most of my work was about. It was interdisciplinary with literature, history, philosophy of science, which is why I say epistemology. But my best teacher for coming to where I am today was being a teacher. So lowest of the low, first year, although I spent most of the time teaching applied rhetoric, I was teaching freshman comp. So this is a super diverse group of students who are showing up for a required class. To be successful, I needed to do two things. One, I had to listen carefully to what these students cared about to actually get them to get something out of the between $5,000 and $8,000 they were paying for this course. And then I had to generalize what I wanted them to learn about enough to make it accessible to them. Okay, so my goal throughout my teaching career, similar to my goal now, is to inculcate effective communication through fit for purpose argumentation. So while a lot of my colleagues were being like, here's an essay, like write something about it, make it sound smart. What I did, because I needed my students to hook in, to be engaged, because the vast, I maybe, I don't know, taught like 4 English majors over my career. No HSPS people. I told my students, okay, guys, get into groups. So you're set up to do some argumentation amongst yourselves. Pick a little part of this essay. This was the first year. And something you react strongly to. What about the sentences are doing this? Grammar, syntax, semantics. What's the whole universe of your group reactions? How are they related or not related? This evolved into a directed research curriculum in my applied rhetoric courses. So I said, okay, guys, go find something out in the world that needs to change. We need a pedestrian bridge over the street. We need better accessibility for people with disabilities in our gym. We need better gym hours. Figure out how it's working, frame up a case for someone who can make a change, do your argumentation, go present it. Some of my students actually argued well enough that they got a stoplight installed on a really busy street corner. So, I mean, it worked. Um, so fast forward, uh, lots of life drama that brought me out of the humanities into what is a much better place for me in corporate. I'm in a trusted advisor role, not so dissimilar to being a teacher. As a trusted advisor, I have to be attuned to what the business says that they want. So they're saying, and then what they demonstrate that they want through their behaviors and through their artifacts, oftentimes their processes and information systems. And then I have to think about why and how those things align or don't align. Because I'm full-time employed, and this is in this role and all of my corporate roles, but I'm effectively providing a boutique service. Um, I it's not enough for me to come up with something that sounds smart or cool. I have to come up with a solution that accommodates process, data, technology, and most importantly, people, and that actually fulfills a business need. And I used to think about the connection from my academic career to my corporate career as like, oh, I became a good EA because I taught my students to do this. But with about a decade of reflection, I'm realizing the teaching was really mutual. Like I asked my students to show me what they were thinking. I evaluated what they were doing. I was very critical, but I was generous. And I was with them as their efforts bore fruit or didn't. But how I demonstrated, elicited, and critiqued them evolved with constant and also often very, very vulnerable feedback. I like I do with my clients now. I constantly ask, how am I doing? Am I giving you what you need? Do you need something else? For a student, it's really hard to say that to someone who's got the power of a grade over you. Um, it's not as perhaps scary when we're all adults in corpo, but I still think many adults, I was always the stupidest person in the room as a scholar, so I don't have this problem, but a lot of us are worried about appearing, I'm not smart enough. I am not creative enough. So I still have to flex that good, compassionate, people-loving listening muscle all the time in corporate, just like my wonderful undergrads at Indiana University taught me how to do.
That's so awesome. I've thought a lot about rhetoric. In fact, I don't know if we talked about this in New York, but my
Yeah.
first career was in college textbook publishing, and I spent my first year and a half on the road with St. Martin's Press selling all
Oh
the
my God, I love
English.
St. Martin's Press.
Yeah, exactly. Everybody does.
Beautiful
And
novels, yeah.
all the English teachers do. But I always thought of rhetoric as like this, not a one-way street, but like a persuasion and, communication, like kind of a old broadcast mentality, kind of not pushy, but the way you just describe it, like it seems like the foundation of your work is like this
It's discursive.
rhetoric, this two-way street, listeny, interactive rhetoric approach. Am I reading that right?
100%. I mean, I'm a Greek American person. It's a Socratic method.
Ah,
Um,
okay.
I
Yeah.
I didn't put words to that until I my mentor and friend Steve Etzel, if you're listening to this is about you at Cargill started doing this with me. This individual trained me to be an enterprise architect, and I realized one day he was using the techniques with me that I was using with my students. And although I don't have that part of philosophy, I'm like, I'm deficient there. I've also had the benefit of really good training from him and other teachers throughout my life to be discursive, to teach argumentation, to get what I want, and to help the people around me, my community, get what they want to. I think
Yeah.
it's 100% needed.
Yeah, and that idea of getting what you want, because that's all, like, especially architects, it's like you craft this beautiful scaffolding or framework or even the whole structure for a thing, with careful listening, all those skills you just been talking about applying, but that doesn't do any good unless you can get
No.
people to take action and actually support you and fund you. Like one of the things you talked about in your talk at KGC was the importance of tying of especially when addressing like the senior executive stakeholders, like
Yes.
tying things to the P&L or other business accomplishments. Can you talk a little bit about how your rhetoric background? I'm picturing how those fit together now, but I want to hear
Yes.
from you if I'm on the right track.
So, I as an enterprise architect who is keen to deliver stuff that actually works for my community, I am all about usability, and 90% of the work I do is like digital anthropology, direct observation. What are you saying you want? What are you actually demonstrating? Excuse me, that you need. And luckily for me, because of product thinking, that is very popular, I think first popularized by Steve Jobs for most of us, there are really strong through lines between I need to be able to do this, and this is the kind of money or the kind of return on investment, whether it's direct cost or indirect cost saving that I am getting. So my first stop when I know I'm going to need money for something or someone for whom I'm advocating, that's the vast majority of the time, needs money, I start with what do you need to do? And my job is easy. I just interview the business and walk backwards with them. Why do you need to do this? Why is it a problem that you can't do this? In one of my previous roles, um, I was serving a business who had a huge drama anytime they wanted to do a big capital software deployment because effectively they outsourced their IP management to one of the big five consulting firms, and this drove time delays, it drove cost overages. So when talking about what would a what would a program that actually works look like, the first thing we talked about is I don't have to go to the vendor. I have all of this knowledge in-house. That's what it would look like. And here are the kinds of interactions I would be able to do that I used to have to like call Big Five on the phone and pay an hourly rate. Wouldn't it be nice if I had a resource internally that I could interrogate? So in that case, what we did is say, okay, you have a usability issue. You want to be able to interrogate a resource and not call up the third party on the phone and pay $200 an hour. Um, Take the $200 an hour and the need to discuss with a human, that's your cost savings, and it's an hourly cost savings, and you can multiply by how long are these program durations to get like this is our actual spend that may show up in another cost center because of how we build those relationships. This is your potential for savings depending upon size of program. You multiply and divide to get that. And that's my formula. Figure out what the problem is, what the current modality to address the program, what the real costs are directly or indirectly, and go from there. I had wonderful coaching from my former VP of finance, whose name's Molly, who sat down with me one day over coffee and like very painfully with the PowerPoint helped me write this out. But thanks to the teaching of that mentor, I have figured out as a person who kind of wishes money would disappear because I think it's evil, I've learned how to do that. And it's something I think anybody, if they are really willing to listen and ask questions about why do you need this? Why is it painful now? And then if they're like me, they need to go to finance and get coaching. Maybe they don't need to go get that coaching. Just like put in that work. I really think anybody can do this.
Interesting. As you talk about that combination of the product mindset you mentioned earlier, that kind of pragmatic financial approach to it, kind of addressing pain, but it's not like selling a SaaS product or it's like a consumer
No.
product or something like that. It's like, but you can say, especially if they've already engaged a consultant, you can go like, remember that $200,000 bill last year? We can do that with Mike, who makes 100 grand, and we only need a quarter of his time. Or that's the kind of argument you're making, right?
Yes. And when I say pain, I don't mean like we eventually get to P&L pain, but we have to start thinking about Javonian 19th century political economic pain. What do you want to be doing that you can't do because you have to focus here instead? And if we are holistic like that, we can eventually, somewhat artificially, reduce that to the P&L. But that's I think the step that good product thinkers do, but
Mhm.
people who don't have that discipline miss. And I think that is so often necessary to get to concrete and convincing statements about the P&L.
I love that you ground that in 19th century political economy,
I do.
but it's like, but it makes perfect sense. That's how you can connect the pain, and then you get to that crass old P&L thing that you need to,
Yeah.
that really matters to a lot of people.
Yeah.
One of the things that you're doing in with all of this, like all of this rhetoric that you need to implement to get the funding and stuff, we're
Yeah.
funding like knowledge engineering, which is really a fascinating part, or probably the most, the host of the Knowledge Graph Insights
Yes.
podcast, it's the most fascinating part of this whole thing to me. Can you talk about like specifically around like, I mean, are you, because you're selling the benefits of a knowledge engineered
Yes.
program. Yeah, can you talk a little bit how you like position that and approach that kind of project?
I'll yes, I can. So this is partly luck, the organizations I've landed in, and partly attraction to organizations that have allowed me to work in this way. So not a humanities scholar anymore, but I'm still like clearly, as you can see, a humanist with a big HCI human computer interaction focus. So um when I work, I think a lot about the digitalization process. And I think about how the information systems we build indicate how we think about the phenomena surrounding us in the world. So how we encode, what kind of structures we impose or neglect to impose oftentimes, the modalities we choose, which can be anything from like a vendor product to a programming language in free open source. Um, when we think about those kinds of things that we can't necessarily induce good answers for or even deduce good answers for without observation, and we have a business problem. uh this is an embarrassing one, but it's a real one. Like, okay, I spent a lot of money curating my product data, but now I can't get good metrics about the products I sold. Happens that although it was not documented this way when investigated, the $2 million data set describes SKUs, not products, which are higher level. So thinking about how we actually digitalize, not how we should, not the ideal data architecture way or enterprise architecture, information
Yeah.
architecture, any other kind of sciencey way, but like how humans actually do it is both key to good programs, and when it's not done well, and this is very common that it's not done well, a fantastic argument for knowledge engineering. Because what does knowledge engineering fix but those perceptual and assumption mismatches between the user and the person who's doing your design and engineering labor for you.
Hey,
So,
I want to make
yes,
sure I'm
let me.
understanding. I think I get that mismatch you were just talking about because that's SKUs or for people who don't know stock keeping units. It's like that's instances of the product, right? Whereas the product,
Right.
like in an ontology, the product would be the class, and the SKU, any one SKU would be an instance. Is that
Mhm.
the
Or
right?
let's think about it. I've got a cup of coffee here.
Uh,
Actually, let me get my glass of water. This is even better. Okay.
okay.
Uh, water product, water in glass, scoop.
Ah, I like that. That's I've used that analogy in content model. That's a whole other thing. Yeah, okay, that's really interesting. Something else you just said in the middle of that story that you reminded me was kind of key to your talk at KGC, if I recall correctly, was that notion that this is all documentation. That like
It is
so
all
much of this,
documentation.
like you're talking about all this people stuff, which makes sense as the foundation of it, but then you have to document like both the discoveries and the decisions and all that stuff.
You do.
Yeah.
And I think a place I have shown as someone who's done knowledge engineering and now leads a lot of uh, activities that rely on knowledge engineering is getting into spaces where there isn't robust documentation. And for me, the supply chain person, that's the physical world. So we're talking legacy technology or companies that even began as pre-digital. Um, I've done a lot of interrogation of the physical world. Like I'm currently working on a program seeking to optimize how we manage passenger compartments in aircraft. And what that's meant for me is like getting down on my hands and knees on 2x4s in an Airbus to see how the aircraft is put together. Um, and as people doing knowledge management, knowledge engineering work, it is crucial that if we can observe a phenomenon, whether that's a human interaction, whether that's a physical object, that we go and interrogate that thing. So we don't end up with the ideal world we get from the data store or the documentation, the schematic or the narrative. I mean, that's what ChatGPT can do. It can interrogate that stuff. That we actually look at the real phenomena. That's how we get to robust systems. And it's not easy, but it's really, really rewarding.
Yeah,
And
and
it
that's
forces us out of our comfort zones as the architect in the ivory tower for those of us who are more comfortable in that space.
yeah, and that gets it kind of like I don't know, one of these certainly core um tools in any architect's toolkit is the modeling skill set. And what you just said, like sorting out SKUs from products or and understanding whether it's an airline cabin or a I don't know, financial instrument or whatever it is, like
Yeah.
truly understanding that so you can model it correctly. Yeah, that's
And this
and
can be physical object or it can be shadowing people. It can be going side by side with your colleagues in the business to see not what they're telling you they're doing. Again, the
mhm.
self-report versus the actual behavior, but what they're actually doing and then asking questions. So you're supposed to be doing this. Why are you doing it this way? And if you ask those questions in a non-judgmental way, if you're really curious, y- suddenly you will understand why the organization and its digitalization program or lack thereof is shaped the way it is.
Yeah. No, the way you just said that too, that distinction between what people say they want and what they actually, and their actual behavior and inferring from that what they
Yes.
actually want. That's probably how Henry Ford came up with cars, not horses, and Steve Jobs,
Yes.
iPhone, all that kind of stuff.
Yes.
Those
With
class,
anthropology.
yeah, exact, just applied anthropology.
Yes.
But that all comes back to the people stuff again. And like
Yeah.
so that combination of crawling around in the Airbus jet and talking to the subject matter experts, and then that culminating, that just as part of this whole process, culminating in a knowledge model or a data model to describe that knowledge. Um, that's, like how complex, like how many stakeholders are we talking about? What are the time scales? Just of a typical, the kind of like, I don't know how you divvy up your work, but like a
For me as an
typical,
individual or like me with teams that
well,
I'm
like for you as
developing
a
service.
team, like getting from that point of understanding the cabin to like having like a digital twin of it or whatever it is you're trying to
Yeah.
get to. Tell me a little bit about that, that the kind of the macro view of that time span.
Oh man, it's like most other things, it depends upon the kind of time and resources, both people's brain power resources and uh where possible and appropriate automation, augmentation by automation come in. And I want to be careful when talking about models that we aren't just thinking about the physical world, but we're also thinking about procedure and process that might not be documented. That's the going and talking to the SMEs saying, why are you doing it this way? When we have our picture of this stuff and we have our picture, which we can also formally model, of how humans interact over time with other humans, with digital artifacts, with physical artifacts, or with their own ideas, then we can start thinking critically about where can I automate? What kinds of technologies can I automate? So here we're bringing the cost down, we're changing the time scale, and we also start understanding, once the universe of known unknowns starts opening up, what kinds of people we have to bring into the program. So I've done programs like this to support major ERP deployments that have involved hundreds of people. And I've done little programs like this to support like a content management system that have involved five. So it really depends on the problem space, the willingness of the organization to invest, and the degree to which automation is not just possible, but a responsible choice, again, depending upon the posture of the organization and its relative conservatism. And for me, I've worked in, as you can probably hear, a lot of really conservative organizations in a like safety first way.
No, and also the span of scale is really from a small 5-person CMS project to a huge ERP thing with
And clearly, I'm not like directing 100 people at once, but I'm
yeah.
working with leadership, stakeholders, and key SMEs to delegate.
Yeah, it's elegant. Well,
Yeah.
hey, Mara, I can't believe it. We're coming up close to time already. But before we wrap up, is there anything last, anything you want to revisit from the conversation or make sure that we share before we wrap up? Um,
Um, for people who, I know I talked about this at KGC, but it's really important. For those of us who are like really committed to having truth and beauty in our systems, don't don't get shut down because you need to justify your activities to finance. You can figure out how to do that. And also don't believe that the real world is worse or uglier than the design you have in your head. The um I know nothing about Japanese philosophy, but 20 years ago I visited a friend in Japan who uh took me all around, and I was struck by the prevalence of asymmetry and decay in so much Japanese art. And she explained this to me as a concept of wabi-sabi, or imperfection in
mm,
beauty. And I think oftentimes that idiosyncratic systems that truly reflect the people they are serving, because remember, our the technology comes from the word for tool. These are things that serve us, and tools that look like us, that reflect us, are ultimately the most beautiful. Just there's my humanism again. So
mhm.
that's my parting shot. Don't be afraid if you have to justify the money. You can do that, and don't be so attached to an ideal outcome that you miss the best possible.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. I want to do a workshop on wabi-sabi now and really get my head all the way around that.
You have to call an art historian.
Yeah, that's right. Hey, one very last thing, Mara. If folks want to follow you or connect online, what's the best place to find you and connect?
LinkedIn. And can I share my contact details with you and share them? Or my personal email. You can find me at mara.inglezakis.owens@gmail.com. I'm not a social media person, but I love people. And if anyone hearing this would like to follow up and talk about this stuff, here I am.
Excellent. I'll put those in the show notes as well.
Okay.
Well, thank you so much, Mara. It's always fun to talk to you, but this was a particularly awesome conversation. So thank you.
Thank you, Larry. The pleasure is mine. Thank you so much for interviewing me today.
For show notes and to sign up for our newsletter, visit our website at knowledgegraphinsights.com. And please rate and review us on your favorite podcast platform. Thank you for listening.